Okay, welcome back to factoring. So I have up here two polynomial expressions. The first thing I want you to think about is every time you hear the word factor, the first thought should be, let's see if all the terms have something in common, whether it be a number, a variable, or a product of both. So I have 2b cubed minus 14b squared minus 3b plus 21. So the first question is, do all four of these terms, do they all have a number you could divide them by? 2, 14, 3, 21. No, you cannot divide them all by the same number other than 1, and that's not going to help. B cubed, b squared, b, no b. Well, they all don't have a variable. So the GCF rule is out. So after you decide that the GCF rule is out, because there are four terms on our checklist of rules, you could just jump right down to grouping. Grouping means to group the first two terms together and to group the last two. And be careful. That symbol belongs to that 3, so that's what you're grouping. Now, what we're looking for is, what do these terms have in common? Well, 2b cubed minus 14b squared have a number in common. You can divide them both by 2. They also have a variable in common. B cubed and b squared, they have b squared in common. So you're going to pull out their GCF, and you're going to tell me what's left. And I have to physically show the division to help me not make a careless error. 2b cubed divided by 2b squared would be b. Negative 14b squared divided by 2b squared would be negative 7. Great? Awesome. Now, you also group the last two terms together. So now you're looking for their GCF. But realize their GCF is going to be different. What can we divide negative 3b and 21 by? Well, they both don't have a variable in common, but they both have a number, 3. Now it's important. Do we divide by positive 3 or negative 3? Well, your goal is to get the next set of parentheses to look identical to this. So you'd want a positive b and a negative 7. So what would you divide negative 3 by that would make the b positive? That's right, you would divide by negative 3. And if you divide this term by negative 3, you better be dividing this term by negative 3. Is 21 divided by negative 3 going to give me negative 7? Yes. So guys and gals, when you're doing grouping, whatever you get in the first set of parentheses, you have to have in the second set of parentheses. So our GCF here is negative 3. That's what we're dividing by. And that's going to leave me b minus 7. But you're not done. This is not completely connected by multiplication. If I read this, 2b squared times b minus 7 minus 3. See, I would say minus. So that's not multiplication. So the last step in the GCF by grouping here is to look and say, hey, we have in common here and here the same parentheses. So we write that parentheses b minus 7. And if we divide that out, that would leave me with 2b squared. And if I divide out that set of parentheses, it would leave me with minus 3. When you factor doing grouping, you should get two binomials. 2 terms times 2 terms. If you want to check it, you would do your FOIL method, first, outer, inner, last, to get back to the original. Okay, let's try one more. So I have my polynomial expression, xy plus y minus x minus 1. And I want to factor. First rule is, do all 4 terms have something in common? Because if they did, we would do the GCF rule. But they all don't. They all don't have the letter x, they all don't have a letter y, and dividing them all by a 1 is not going to change what we have. So there is no GCF of all 4 terms. So I'm going to group them 2 by 2, Noah's Ark. The first 2 terms, they have in common the letter y. So I'm going to pull out a y, and I'm going to physically write it so I can see it. xy divided by y, well, the y's would cancel and leave me just x. Y divided by y would cancel, but that is connected by addition, and we've already discussed this. If you connect a 1 by adding or subtracting, you must write it down. So y divided by y is 1, but that 1 is connected by addition. I have to write it. Over here, y divided by y is 1, but I didn't write it because 1 times x is still x. Then we get to the last 2 terms. Well, you have to follow the process. You must divide these by something they have in common, their GCF. Well, the only thing you divide a letter, a variable, and a number by is the number 1. So the question is, do we divide these both by a positive 1? Or do we divide these both by a negative 1? Well, think about your goal. Your goal is to get in parentheses x plus 1. So what would you divide a negative x by to make a positive x? That's right, you would divide by negative 1. So let's see if that works. If I divide negative x by negative 1, I'd get a positive x. If I divide negative 1 by negative 1, I get a positive 1. And that's our goal, to get the same parentheses. So the GCF here was negative 1. When you're doing grouping, you must pull out the GCF of the first 2 terms. You must pull out the GCF of the second 2 terms. Now we're not finished. We have in common an x plus 1. And what's left is on the outside is y minus 1. My last thing to note, we've already discussed this. It's connected by multiplication, these 2 binomials. So if you wrote y minus 1 times x plus 1, it means the same thing. Remember, that's your commutative property of multiplication. Doesn't matter what order you multiply in, you get the same result. So the moral of the story is, if all your terms do not have something in common, a GCF, then you group them 2 by 2 and do the grouping method. All right, another rule's coming your way. See you then.